arrived at the walled garden, he was already there at the appointed bench. He was reading the brass plaque. "Ted," he said as she came up beside him. He loved this place. She said, "It always says that." "It doesn't always say Ted," he replied, sitting. "Now, did he love this place before there was a bench?" she asked. She said archly. "Did he come here and stand in this very spot so that when he died they thought, 'We'll put up a bench'?" "Yes, for Ted. He loved this place." They allowed themselves a little titter after that. He said, "Would you like to be a bench one day?" "Oh," she answered, "I haven't thought about it. I don't like to think about that. Although, at our age," here he dug her in the ribs a little with his elbow. He said, "Have I ever told you how old I am?" "No," she said, and she didn't want to know. "As old as the century," he said proudly. "I turned 82 on the 1st of January. The wind blew suddenly. She shivered. In any case," she said, "no point in being morbid." "No. Good God, no." They smiled at each other. He said, I see you brought a flask." She produced it from a string bag. "Little plastic cups," he said, "lined with kitchen roll. Oh, to keep them clean." "Oh, of course," he said. I remembered from the luncheon club," she continued, reddening a little, "that you like yours with milk and one. So I've already taken the liberty, I hope you don't mind, of adding in advance." "Good idea," he said. "Less to lug around." "Oh, and I find the sugar gets everywhere," she said. "And then there's the worry of what to put the milk in and how to pour it without a spout." "No, you've done well," he said. "Top notch." They sipped their tea in silence. Luncheon club, she thought. Whoever thought that up? And it did seem a rather lofty title for the elderly gathering that met at the church hall. But something to do, she thought, and that's important. She said, "Did you come by bus?" "Walked," he said. "I only live down the road," and he gestured vaguely with his walking stick. "I like to keep active," he said. "Well, you certainly are. I mean, everybody says." "Yes," he said. "Can't complain." How solid it all seemed. The bench, and the walled-in garden, and the family in front of them walking past the black-eyed margaritas. Even the two of them, there, together. "Little tyke," he said, of the small boy who had broken away from his parents and was peeing on a potty pellegrinum. But why should it not be disgusting when a child does that, he wondered out loud. Now, if it were me... She had a mental image for a moment, one she'd rather not. But the mother was there now, admonishing, covering the little bottom with his pants and trousers and sweeping it up in long, strong arms. "Yes," he said, looking at his hands. "We were all God's children once." He rubbed his knuckles. Did you know that not one bit of you is more than 7 years old?" "I did not," she said somewhat stiffly. "Oh, yes," he said. "Your body regenerates. New cells, new everything. Then why do we age?" "Oh, it's like those carbon copies. They start getting smudgy." Oh, she said. "How could I forget?" And she started rummaging around in her bag. "Flapjack!" "Better not," he said. "Dentures." "My wife used to make flapjacks," he said, "and more often than not sponges." She nodded, chewing a little self-consciously. How long have you been on your own? She asked, although she knew. It was a matter of some discussion amongst the Mavis Sim Brigade at the luncheon club. 12 years, cancer. He still grieved, apparently. Well, they'd know about that. They all took turns clucking around him like a band of nurses vying for position, with Mavis Sim as matron. Perhaps because he knew there was no need, he didn't answer. He said, "You never married?" It sounded like a question, but it wasn't. Like so many of my generation, she felt the need to explain. There wasn't enough to go around. No, he mused. All those maiden aunts. Quite, she said, although frowning at maiden. But what did it matter now? We're all on our own in any case, she thought. And was it any better to endure the grief of losing someone than the ache of never having had? I've always had an independent life, she said. Oh, yes, he said. One sees that. A certain distance. But it didn't put him off. It's been said before, she said proudly and resigned. So self-contained, George had always said. And she wondered which would be the consequence of the other. I admire you, she said. I couldn't have done without my family. Do your children live nearby? No. Oh, then you do without them now? I suppose so, but in the end, they're there. There was someone special. She confessed, still thinking of George. But that was a long time ago. All those years, she thought, typing his letters. Happy years. And George, she thought, he'd call her my dearest friend. Oh, of course, it was all perfectly proper and above board. She hadn't even expected to see him after she retired. Well, not really. Well, that's life, she said. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. But she didn't sound certain. I couldn't help noticing, he said, when you opened your handbag, that there was a plastic bag in there, neatly folded. Oh, yes, I always carry a plastic bag, she said. You never know when you might need one. Plastics are busting invented, he declared. There's a shop round the corner from me that has this machine. Fantastic. He pulled out his wallet. Photos, notes, his bus pass, tube map, dial-up pizza, cab numbers, laminated, all of them. I'd do it to 10-pound notes if I could. Oh, may I? She asked hesitantly, sticking out a finger. By all means, he said. You don't get those dog-eared corners, she breathed, stroking the smoothness of his library card. You certainly do not, he agreed. These will outlast my grandsons. She started at the word. She'd heard he had a grandson in the Navy on his way to the Falklands, but she didn't like to ask. No doubt Mavis Sim would tell her all about it, her great bosom heaving and puffing with concern and self-importance. But of course, Mavis's bosom wouldn't heave again. She'd forgotten for a moment. Incredibly. But the regularity of it these days, it was hard to get used to. She said, poor Mavis. She had a good send-off. Oh, wasn't it lovely? It's like being in Logan's Run, she thought, or some other science fiction, waiting to complete or ascend or whatever such term they wanted to use. It had always been like that, she realized now. marking time. She didn't know what she'd kept herself safe from. Do you think, he asked, do you think, as we've now seen each other on several occasions, that you'd feel comfortable coming to my house for a cup of tea? Your house, she said, almost breathless. Oh, I think we've had the best of the sun. Oh, yes, she agreed. It's getting chilly. We can stroll through the park, he said, offering her his arm. Mavis Sim, he thought, as they walked towards his terraced house. A fine figure of a woman. A fine physical figure. That's how what he tried to retain. The part that afterlife can't supply. Here we are, he said, unlocking the door, hanging up his coat. The physicality of things. He thought, hanging hers. Even now, he could smell his wife if he opened the wardrobe and unzipped the clothes bags he'd had the foresight to store her things in. Her flesh was lost to him, but he could somewhat reconjure in this manner, although it did cause him pain. There was a certain security in numbers he'd learned. Anything I can do? She asked. I don't think so, he replied, wondering if she noticed the timing of his interest. Why don't you go and sit down? I'll be in a minute. She went into the sitting room. The sofa, she discerned, was covered in a film of plastic. So were the armchairs. Oh, I've got a staple gun, he said by way of explanation. Oh, have they always been like this? Oh, no, he said. It's a recent thing. She smiled weakly. She said, suppose it's easier to clean. Oh, saves a lot of wear and tear. They're like new under there, look. Oh, yes, he continued. These chairs will see me out. She was wondering how old they'd been when he embalmed them, but he interrupted her by sitting beside her and regarding her intently. A fine figure of a woman, he said, sliding towards her. He stuck out the tip of his tongue and licked her ear. Oh! She cried, but she didn't stop him. He went on, brushing the side of her face with his lips until she relaxed against him, until they swayed together somewhat stiffly, the plastic squeaking underneath them.